Dinner, a phone call. The warden asked, his voice flat like he'd said those words 1,000 times before. I shook my head slowly. I want to see my dog. For the first time in years, the room felt smaller. Warden Thompson looked at me over the thin file in his hands. His hair was gray, his face tired, the kind of tired that doesn't come from one long day but from a lifetime of watching men walk toward the same ending. He was used to final requests, steak dinners, cigarettes, desperate calls to people who stopped picking up years ago. A dog wasn't on the list. "You're sure?" he asked. I nodded. My hands were steady, even with the cuffs biting into my wrists. I'd had 7 years to practice being steady, 7 years to learn how not to beg. He studied me for a moment longer, then closed the file. "All right," he said, "I'll see what I can do." That was it, no promise, no comfort, just procedure. When he left, the cell went quiet again. Too quiet. The fluorescent light above me buzzed like it always did, flickering just enough to remind me it could die at any moment, just like me. My chains clinked softly as I shifted on the bench. The sound echoed off concrete walls stained by time and regret. This was supposed to be the end. Everyone knew it, including me. I leaned back and closed my eyes, not to pray, but to remember. The feel of fur under my hand. The weight of a warm body leaning against my leg. A pair of eyes that never looked at me with doubt. 40 minutes passed. Each one felt heavier than the 7 years before it. I'd survived appeals, interviews, and silent nights where sleep never came. I'd learned how to live with the idea that the world had already decided who I was. But waiting was different. Waiting made your heart count every second. Finally, the door opened. "Time," a guard said. They led me down the corridor, past rows of locked doors and faces I didn't look at anymore. The air changed as we moved. Less stale, colder. The smell of disinfectant faded, replaced by open space and morning wind. The prison courtyard came into view. Gray concrete, tall walls topped with coils of barbed wire. No sky, really, just a narrow strip of pale blue trapped between steel and stone. The cold cut straight through the thin fabric of my orange jumpsuit, and I shivered without meaning to. That's when I saw it. Parked near the gate was a black SUV. Not a prison vehicle, not a delivery truck. This thing was polished, expensive, completely out of place. Its windows were dark, the kind that don't let you see who's inside. It looked like it belonged in a private driveway, not a yard meant for final goodbyes. My stomach tightened. People like me didn't attract luxury. We attracted paperwork. A man stood near the SUV, leaning casually against the hood. Dark suit, perfect posture. Hands relaxed like this was just another stop in his day. Even from a distance, I knew who he was. John Harris. The prosecutor. The man who had stood in a courtroom 7 years ago and looked straight at the jury while he described me as a monster. The man whose voice never shook when he asked for my death. The man who made sure I ended up here. He turned his head slightly, and our eyes met. He smiled. Not wide, not cruel, just satisfied. The kind of smile a man wears when he believes everything has gone exactly the way it should. My chest felt tight, but my face didn't change. I'd learned that too, never give them the moment they're waiting for. The guards positioned me near the center of the yard. The gate behind me clanked shut, loud and final. Somewhere I heard the faint jingle of a leash. My heart skipped. I looked toward the entrance, searching. If this was really happening, if my last wish had actually been granted, then Rex should be coming through that gate any second now. But before I could see him, my eyes drifted back to the black SUV. To Harris, to the man who had come not out of duty, but to watch. And in that moment, standing between concrete walls and cold air, I realized something was very wrong. Because people like him didn't show up to say goodbye. They showed up to make sure you didn't walk away. I recognized him instantly. The man who put me here was smiling. John Harris stepped away from the black SUV like he owned the place. Sharp dark suit, clean shoes that had never touched a prison floor. His tie was perfect, his posture relaxed, as if this wasn't a death row courtyard but a business meeting he was early for. He looked at me the way a man looks at a finished project. "So," he said, his voice smooth, almost friendly, "this is it." I didn't answer. I focused on my breathing instead. Slow in, slow out. I had learned a long time ago that silence unsettled people like him more than anger ever could. Harris glanced around, taking in the gray walls, the guards, the cold morning air. I always believe in seeing things through to the end, he continued. Closure matters. Closure, that was his word for it. The guards stood nearby, pretending not to listen. Their faces were neutral, but I could feel the tension in the way they held their shoulders, the way no one moved unless they had to. This wasn't routine anymore, not with him here. Harris took a few steps closer, lowering his voice just enough to feel personal. You had your chances, he said. Appeals, reviews, all of it, but the truth always wins. I almost laughed. Instead, I kept my eyes on the concrete. Then I heard it. A soft clink of metal, the sound of a leash being adjusted. My heart jumped before my mind could stop it. The gate creaked open, and a guard stepped through, holding a large German shepherd by the leash. Rex. Time hit him harder than it hit me. His coat, once thick and shining, was dull now, streaked with gray. His muzzle was almost white, his ears less sharp. One of his back legs dragged slightly as he walked, the limp obvious even from a distance. But his eyes were still the same deep brown I remembered, alert, intelligent, alive. My throat tightened. I dropped to my knees without thinking, the cuffs pulling at my wrists as I opened my arms. Hey, boy, I whispered, my voice breaking before I could stop it. It's okay, I'm here. This was the moment I'd been holding together for. This was supposed to be it. But Rex didn't run. He slowed. 3 steps away, he stopped completely. His body stiffened. The fur along his neck began to rise, one line at a time, like a warning being written across his back. A low growl rolled out of his chest, deep and sharp, the kind of sound that didn't belong in a farewell. Confusion hit me hard. Rex, I said softly, it's me. He didn't look at me. His eyes were locked on John Harris. The growl grew louder. The guard holding the leash shifted his weight, uneasy. That's strange, he muttered under his breath. Harris noticed it too. His smile faltered for half a second before he covered it. Still aggressive, he said lightly. Figures. Rex took 1 step forward, not toward me but toward Harris. I stood up slowly, my heart pounding now. This wasn't fear. This was something else, something sharp and sudden like memory waking up. Easy, the guard warned, tightening his grip. Harris laughed, short and dismissive. Relax, dogs sense weakness, that's all. But Rex wasn't sensing weakness. He was sensing something he hadn't forgotten. Harris walked closer, hands open, palms out, as if addressing a misbehaving animal. Come on, he said mockingly. You've had your moment. Rex's lips pulled back, teeth flashing white against his dark gums. The growl dropped lower, deeper, vibrating through the cold air. Every sound in the yard seemed to disappear. No wind, no distant footsteps, just that growl heavy with warning. Harris stopped smiling. Let's end this circus, he said, his voice sharp now, stepping forward again. And that was when Rex's growl turned feral. Rex lunged. The leash slipped from the guard's hands as the German shepherd shot forward like a living missile. Harris didn't see it coming. 1 second he was stepping toward me, smug and in control. The next he was on the ground, arms flailing, suit jacket tearing as Rex's teeth sank into the sleeve. A scream tore from his mouth, sharp and high-pitched, echoing off the concrete walls. The guards rushed, but Rex was relentless. The sound of ripping fabric and growls filled the yard, mixing with the pounding of my own heart. I froze, watching, as the man who had haunted my nights for 7 years thrashed under the dog's fury. Then I saw it. A pale line, jagged and uneven, ran along Harris's forearm. A scar long and deep, whitened with age, but unmistakable. My chest tightened. Memories hit me in an instant. 7 years ago. I had returned home from work, tired, eager to see my wife. The kitchen was dark, silent, but for the faint, sharp smell of blood. My wife was on the floor, motionless, eyes wide with shock and pain. I didn't even think. I called her name. I screamed. And through the haze of grief, I saw Rex staggering in from the back door, his own leg bleeding, his coat matted with blood, not mine, but someone else. I had knelt beside him, cradling his body, trying to understand. He limped, eyes sharp despite the pain, holding something in his teeth, clothing, not mine, not hers, someone else. The police arrived and immediately assumed the worst. Rex became a witness to my crime in their eyes, and I became a murderer in the world's eyes. Back in the courtyard, I took a slow, steadying breath. My eyes never left Harris's arm. "That's your scar," I said, my voice calm but carrying the weight of years. "The bite from my dog, from the night my wife was killed." Harris's face twisted. He tried to pull his sleeve down, hide the evidence. This is absurd," he stammered, voice rising. "I was bitten by a stray dog at my dacha 3 years ago. I didn't even report it." I stepped forward, urgency threading my words. "If it was random, why didn't you go to the police? Why hide it? My dog remembers. My dog never forgets." The warden took a careful step closer, his sharp eyes narrowing at Harris's exposed forearm. Thompson's hand brushed over the scar, hesitant but steady, and his expression changed, subtle but unmistakable. He was thinking, connecting. Sam, the older guard who had always treated me with quiet respect, spoke for the first time. His voice was low, deliberate, carrying the authority of someone who had seen things others ignored. "I remember," he said, his eyes fixed on Harris. "7 years ago, right after the murder, you called in sick. Broke your arm, you said. Took 2 weeks off work. I saw the bandages myself at the courthouse." Harris's jaw tightened. His eyes darted between Sam, the warden, and me. For the first time, he looked small, unsure, exposed. The courtyard felt impossibly still, the growl from Rex softening but not disappearing, like a warning that hadn't left. Thompson pulled out his phone and dialed. "I need John Harris's medical records," he said crisply, his voice carrying over the tense silence. 10 years' worth, today, urgent, request from the state hospital. Every second dragged, every moment stretched taut, and I felt the weight of 7 years pressing down. My hands clenched the chains, knuckles white, but my face remained calm. Harris's lips quivered. His smugness was gone, replaced by sweat beading on his forehead. He tried to speak, but no words came. Rex sat at my side now, still alert, tail slow but not wagging. His eyes never left Harris. The dog had remembered everything, and the truth was clawing its way back to the surface. The phone call ended. Thompson's voice was sharp as he held the device in front of Harris. "We'll see if the records match your story." The air hung thick with tension. Every guard, every officer, every shadowed corner of the yard waited. And for the first time in 7 years, I felt the scales of justice tilt. Not because of a court, not because of law, but because Rex had never forgotten. The truth was about to surface, and nothing would ever be the same. Diagnosis: deep lacerations consistent with large dog bites. The words rang through the courtyard over the warden's speakerphone, cold and precise. Harris froze, the color draining from his face. For a moment, he looked like the man who had been caught in a trap he couldn't talk his way out of. Then his eyes darted, frantic, searching for an excuse that didn't exist. That's impossible," he stammered. I told you it was just a stray, a random dog, nothing to do with him." But the words had no weight. They didn't land. The proof was in his arm, in the scar that glinted under the morning light, and now in the official records that confirmed the bite exactly 7 years ago, at the exact time of the crime. Rex's growl didn't soften. The dog's fur along his neck remained bristled, eyes fixed on Harris like a predator remembering every misstep. He stepped forward slightly, the leash straining, low warning rumble rolling from deep in his chest. The guards around the yard didn't move. Silence settled over them like a heavy curtain. No laughter, no chatter, no casual shifting, just quiet. Every eye was on Harris, and the weight of their silent judgment pressed harder than any words could. I stepped closer, voice calm but carrying every ounce of the urgency I felt. 7 years, my wife's death, all the evidence ignored, and you hid it. You tried to cover it, but Rex never forgets. He remembers everything. Harris swallowed hard, his hands twitching. His jaw tightened, lips pressed into a thin line. You're insane," he yelled, panic creeping into his tone. "It's been 7 years, that dog, it's not." "You lied," Warden Thompson interrupted, voice hard, precise. No patience left for hesitation. "Records don't lie. You were treated for these injuries 7 years ago. You didn't file a report. You didn't explain them. You hid them." Every word landed like a hammer. Harris's face flushed crimson, sweat glistening along his temples. He tried to cover his arm again, the sleeve trembling in his hands. I was careless. It was I." The words faltered. Denial had run out. The truth had circled him completely. I watched, heart steady but racing underneath as the pieces finally fell into place in my mind. The broken timeline, the blood on Rex, the stolen locket that never surfaced, the police who ignored the real evidence, every injustice, every doubt cast on me, it all pointed to the same thing. The dog had remembered, the records confirmed, and Harris's arrogance had finally trapped him in his own lies. Rex's growl shifted, a low vibration through the ground, not directed at me now, but at Harris. It was a warning, a signal, a memory of the night he had come for my wife. I felt a shiver run down my spine. The dog had chosen. The dog knew. Thompson's gaze remained locked on Harris. His tone was no longer neutral. "Explain yourself," he said, each word clipped, measured. "Explain why you hid this, why you lied, why the victim's dog, your alleged accident, lines up with every moment of this crime." Harris's shoulders slumped, his arrogance crumbling piece by piece. His eyes flicked between me, the warden, and Rex. He opened his mouth, then shut it, realizing no lies could fill the gap anymore. The wind whipped through the courtyard, carrying the tension with it. Even the guards shifted slightly, an almost imperceptible acknowledgement of the coming revelation. Then, as if sensing something I could not yet see, Rex's body tensed again. The leash strained. His growl dropped lower, vibrating through the concrete, warning everyone of an unseen discovery. And just like that, he pulled away from Harris, not slowly, not hesitantly. With sudden, precise force, Rex lunged toward the black SUV parked by the gate. Every head turned, eyes following the dog's movement. Harris's panic returned, immediate and raw. "No, stop him, that's private property." The guards froze, unsure if they should intervene. Warden Thompson's eyes narrowed. Something had shifted. The dog had found something else. And in that instant, I realized Rex wasn't done, not by a long shot. The truth was still coming. And whatever was in that SUV would change everything. Rex clawed at the trunk like his life depended on it, nails scraping against the metal with relentless fury. The dog's growl was low, urgent, filled with memory and purpose. Every second stretched impossibly long as Harris lunged forward, hands flailing. "Get back, that's private property," he shouted, panic sharp in his voice. But Warden Thompson stepped firmly between them, eyes cold and commanding. "It's prison property now, open it, or I will." Harris froze, his smugness evaporating under the warden's unwavering stare. He stammered, words failing him, and for the first time he looked powerless. Rex's insistence didn't waver. The dog's nose pushed, teeth gripped, claws dug. Thompson motioned to the guards. "Open it now." The black trunk creaked as it lifted, revealing a series of suitcases and duffel bags, packed, organized as if for a long journey. Luxury luggage, expensive and polished, out of place in the cold gray courtyard. My stomach sank. He had planned this. Escape, disappearance, maybe a life untouched by the justice he had tried to bury me under. Rex dove in, sniffing, clawing with precision until something small and gleaming tumbled onto the asphalt. It bounced once, then came to rest at Thompson's feet. The warden bent, picking it up carefully. A silver locket, tarnished slightly with age, delicate, familiar. My breath caught. I recognized it immediately. The photograph inside, faded but unmistakable, was my wife, smiling at the camera the way she used to when she thought the world was ours. My hands trembled as the memories hit me like a physical blow. 7 years of pain, humiliation, and false blame came crashing down at once. Harris's face went pale, a shadow of panic flickering across his features. He opened his mouth, searching for an excuse, but nothing could fill the space left by undeniable proof. I sank to my knees, unable to stop the wave of emotion. My chest tightened, and for a moment I felt the years, the fear, the false guilt, the hopelessness crash over me like a storm. Rex pressed closer, gray muzzle brushing against my palm, his tail stiff but steady. He had remembered. He had never forgotten. The guards exchanged looks, subtle but unmistakable. The disbelief in their eyes began to shift, replaced by understanding. Even without words, they were witnessing the unraveling of a lie that had haunted me for nearly a decade. Thompson's voice cut through the silence, hard and sharp. "Mr. Harris," he said, holding the locket up, "explain this. Why is this in your possession? Why did you hide it? Why bring it here today?" Harris's lips trembled, and his usual arrogance had evaporated entirely. The city of his self-confidence lay in ruins before the quiet authority of the warden, the silent weight of the guards, the accusing eyes of a dog who remembered everything, and the broken man before him, me. He shook his head, unable to meet anyone's gaze. Sweat glistened on his forehead, hands fumbling at his suit. I can't, he began, then stopped, voice cracking under pressure he hadn't known existed. Rex growled again, a warning this time not just at Harris, but at the lies he had carried for 7 long years. The dog's eyes locked on him, unwavering, and Harris flinched, shrinking under the weight of recognition that the truth had found its witness. The courtyard was silent except for the wind and the faint whine of Rex, still standing guard. Every second stretched, the tension building to a point where you could feel it in your chest, the moment before confession, the truth pressing, undeniable, unstoppable. Harris's hands shook as he reached up to his face, covering his eyes for just a moment before lowering them. The arrogance, the pride, the years of denial, they had all vanished. All that remained was fear, guilt, and the unavoidable weight of justice delivered not by law alone, but by memory, loyalty, and a dog who never forgot. And then it began. The confession was coming. She chose you, Harris whispered, voice breaking, eyes hollow. That's why I killed her. The words landed like stones in the gray courtyard, echoing off the walls. Silence followed, thick and suffocating. The guards didn't move. Rex's growl softened, but his gaze never left Harris. I felt the years, the fear, the pain, the humiliation tighten in my chest. Harris ran a trembling hand down his face, trying to compose himself, but the weight of 7 years pressed down too heavily. I loved her since university, he continued, voice trembling with raw obsession. I offered her everything, my career, my money, my position, and she laughed at me, said I was disgusting, said she wanted nothing to do with me. His arrogance had dissolved completely, replaced by exhaustion and desperation. He sank to his knees, the once powerful prosecutor, now a broken man. That night, I went to her apartment. I thought maybe I could convince her just one last time, but she refused. She rejected me. I lost control. I grabbed the knife on the counter. His voice faltered, cracking under the weight of what he had done. In my mind, I was back there, the night I came home to the nightmare. I saw the kitchen as it had been, smelled the faint metallic tang of blood. But I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I remembered calmly each detail, my wife falling, my panic, and then Rex. Rex had appeared at the edge of the room, limping, wounded, yet fearless. The dog's growl had been low, a warning. Harris had swung at him, tried to fend him off, and the animal had bitten, leaving a deep, unmistakable scar. And then he had fled, leaving the chaos behind, convinced I would take the blame. I knelt in the courtyard now, letting the memory wash over me. The pain was there, sharp, precise, but I held it steady. No melodrama, just truth, the kind that never fades. Rex pressed his gray muzzle against my hand, grounding me, steadying me, loyal in a way no human ever could be. Harris looked up, eyes wide, the reality finally breaking him completely. It wasn't supposed to end like this, he gasped. I never thought you'd the dog, he remembered. Thompson's hand moved to his radio, voice calm but commanding. 2 guards handcuff him, notify the police, arrest on site, prepare for an emergency review. This case is reopened immediately. The guards moved quickly, precise, efficient. Harris didn't resist. He was too spent, too beaten by truth and memory. His hands were cuffed behind his back, the weight of guilt pressing down with every motion. I exhaled slowly, feeling a strange mixture of relief and sorrow. 7 years of injustice, 7 years of waiting, and it had taken the unwavering loyalty of one old dog to bring the truth to light. Rex sat beside me, tail swishing lightly, eyes still watchful. He had remembered. He had waited. And now justice, long delayed, was finally arriving. The black SUV sat idle, a silent witness to the unraveling of lies. The locket still gleamed in Thompson's hand, a small, quiet symbol of the life that had been stolen and the truth that had survived. I looked at Rex's gray muzzle resting on my knee and felt the full weight of what had happened. Not just freedom, but vindication. Not just proof, but closure. The dog had never faltered, never forgotten, never let the memory fade. Loyalty, it seemed, was more enduring than fear, more patient than time, and more powerful than any human attempt to bury the truth. Thompson's phone rang, breaking the heavy silence. He answered quickly, voice clipped. Yes, I understand. Emergency review initiated. Case re-examined. Immediate suspension of execution pending new evidence. A shiver of disbelief ran through me. Hours ago, I had been staring at the end of my life. Now, in the same courtyard where fear and despair had ruled for years, hope pressed against the walls like sunlight through the bars. Rex nudged my hand, reminding me he was still there, still loyal, still my anchor in the storm. I stood, letting the wind whip through my prison jumpsuit. 7 long years of waiting, and finally the tide had turned. But even as relief seeped in, the clock still ticked. Execution had been scheduled. Freedom wasn't immediate. Legal wheels moved slowly, painfully. The warden's phone calls ensured momentum, but every second that passed reminded me how close the end had been, and how fragile this reversal truly was. Harris, handcuffed, sat on the concrete, the arrogant man finally humbled. But the story wasn't over yet. Not until the courts reviewed the evidence. Not until the world saw the truth. And not until I walked out of that gate with Rex by my side, finally free. The dog's eyes met mine, steady, patient, victorious. And in that gaze, I understood something simple and profound. Justice doesn't always come from a courtroom. Sometimes it comes from those who remember, who wait, and who never give up. The emergency review had begun. The execution was paused, and the final chapter, my freedom, was still to be written. The gates didn't open for execution. They opened for freedom. I stepped onto the cold asphalt, the city air biting at my skin. 7 years of orange jumpsuits, gray walls, and barbed wire evaporated in a single motion. My legs felt heavy, almost unwilling to carry me, and yet each step was more certain than the last. Rex walked beside me, limping slightly but proud, tail held high. He had been my anchor through every nightmare, every false accusation, every lonely night. And now he was still there. Warden Thompson fell back a step, clearing the way. His eyes were solemn, tired, but his voice carried the weight of truth and apology. "I'm sorry," he said, "not just for the years I had lost, but for the failures of a system that had almost taken my life unjustly. We failed you. I failed you. You deserved better." I didn't answer immediately. Words felt hollow after 7 years of silence and waiting. Instead, I touched Rex's fur, letting the simple warmth ground me. The world outside was strange, bright, and overwhelming. Traffic noises, distant sirens, the smell of wet asphalt after the morning rain, it all hit me at once. But for the first time, it felt like the world was mine to face, not the walls and gates that had defined me for so long. Thompson continued, almost in a whisper. "Compensation, rehabilitation, you will have it. We'll do everything possible to make this right." His hand rested briefly on my shoulder, a small gesture of human acknowledgement in the vast machinery of justice. Rex sniffed the air, ears flicking toward the street. He had remembered every detail of that night, every scar, every lost moment. His presence was a reminder justice had not been delayed forever. It had waited for the right moment, the right proof, the right loyal heart to guide it. I took a deep breath, feeling the gravity of freedom settle in my chest. It wasn't triumph, not yet. It was disbelief, relief, and exhaustion rolled into one quiet, overwhelming emotion. The courtyard behind me felt like a memory, a world I had escaped but could never forget. As Thompson stepped back, the massive gates creaked open fully. Sunlight spilled onto the wet asphalt, catching on the edges of Rex's gray fur. My first step outside the prison walls was tentative, cautious, almost ceremonial. Each step was a claim, not a vengeance, but of life reclaimed. The taxi Sam had called waited nearby, engine humming softly, a promise of motion, of going somewhere. I opened the back door, helping Rex inside, and watched him settle as if he had always belonged in the outside world, not the confines of a cell. The warden's voice followed me, steady but tinged with finality. "Go where you need to go, make it right. Live." I closed the door gently, my hands lingering on the handle for a moment longer than necessary. The city stretched out before me, unknown and yet familiar in its ordinary rhythms. I had been stolen from it once. I would not be stolen again. The taxi pulled away, and the concrete walls, barbed wire, and gates receded behind us. Rex rested his muzzle on my knee, eyes half closed but alert. I knew the first destination I needed to reach. The place where grief had settled, where memory demanded acknowledgement, where love had once been violently taken from me. A cemetery loomed ahead, gray stones rising like silent witnesses. I had not been able to grieve properly in 7 years. Today I would. Today I would tell her that we had not forgotten her. Today I would place our pain, our relief, and our justice into the quiet earth that held her name. Rex stirred beside me, sensing the weight of the moment. He had guided me through this labyrinth of deceit, violence, and years lost. And now he would witness the final act of remembrance. The taxi slowed, turned, and stopped. My heart clenched as the familiar path to her grave came into view. White roses rested on the passenger seat, a small tribute to the life that had been stolen, the love that had been constant, and the justice that had finally arrived. I exhaled slowly, the city sounds fading into the background. The gates had opened not for death, not for punishment, but for truth, for memory, for a quiet reckoning. And in that moment, with Rex at my side and the cemetery ahead, I finally understood that some loyalty, some justice, some love, waits for a lifetime but never forgets. The taxi doors opened and I stepped out, the cool wind brushing against my face. Ahead lay her grave, silent and solemn, waiting for me to finally speak, finally mourn, finally honor the truth. The final emotional destination awaited. I didn't go home. I went to her. The cemetery was quiet, the gray stones standing like sentinels under the pale autumn sky. White roses rested in my hand, their petals damp from the morning mist. I knelt before her grave, the simple stone engraved with her name and the years she had lived. 7 long years had passed since that night, years filled with fear, uncertainty, and silence. But here I was, finally able to honor her memory, finally able to speak the words my heart had carried for so long. I placed the roses gently on the headstone, the scent of their petals mixed with the cold, earthy smell of the damp grass. "We won, darling," I whispered, my voice shaking but steady. "Rex and I, we found the truth. Justice has been done." Rex sat beside me, his gray muzzle resting lightly on my knee. He had limped through the years, carried the memory of that night in every step, and now, finally, he could rest. His eyes, still sharp and intelligent, met mine, full of understanding. Loyalty isn't measured in years, I thought, but in the moments when it matters most. And Rex had proven that loyalty never forgets, never wavers, and never gives up. I took a deep breath, letting the wind rustle the leaves around us. The city beyond the cemetery felt distant, irrelevant. Here time moved differently. Here grief, loss, and justice coexisted in a quiet, powerful equilibrium. I didn't feel the need for revenge. Harris had been humbled, his guilt exposed, his lies unmasked. What remained was the peace that comes from truth finally surfacing, from the story being told as it should have been 7 years ago. I ran my fingers across the stone, feeling the cold, etched letters beneath my touch. I remembered her smile, her laughter, the way she had lit up the smallest moments of life. And I remembered Rex, how he had carried the burden of memory silently, how he had waited for the moment to set things right. Together we had endured, and together we had finally won. The wind carried a faint chill, but it didn't touch me. I let the tears come slow and steady, not for myself, but for what had been stolen, for the years we had lost, for the love that had been taken too soon. Rex stayed still, his presence grounding me, reminding me that the fight had been worth it. I rose slowly, brushing the damp grass from my knees. The roses remained on the grave, a small tribute to the life, the love, and the truth that had survived everything. I looked down at Rex, and he wagged his tail lightly, a quiet acknowledgement of victory. Not loud, not celebratory, just steady and proud, the way loyalty and truth always are when they finally triumph. The moral settled in my chest like a quiet ember. Justice isn't always found in courtrooms, in verdicts, in the clattering of gavels. Sometimes it waits in hearts that remember, in creatures who never forget, in truths that refuse to stay buried. And sometimes it arrives in the calm, quiet moment when the world finally bends back toward rightness, even after years of wrong. I took a final look at the headstone, at the white roses, at the witness of the faithful dog at my side. I didn't need words. The moment spoke for itself. 7 years of injustice, 7 years of waiting, and now, finally, resolution. Justice doesn't always come from a courtroom. Sometimes it comes from a heart that never forgot.